Screech by TarynMcT. Read by Oakshadow 5. Chapter 31. This is bullshit, Hitoshi thought to himself as he dodged another hit from one of the science fair reject monsters. They were fast, but not as fast as the one from the USJ. They were strong, but, again, not as strong as that one. The area was so saturated in monsters, he wasn't able to just run to the perimeter like Izu told him to. Hitoshi paused in his running as he caught sight of his dad fighting. In the years Hitoshi had been living with his parents, he'd never felt like his dad was useless in a battle. Well, congrats, universe. Today's the day. All he could do was watch helplessly as his dad threw the monsters to another hero with a destructive quirk and dodged the hits that were aimed at him. Most of the monsters were shrugging off his dad's attacks, and Hitoshi winced as dad's knife snapped in half as it struck one of the creatures that looked to have some sort of rock quirk. Hitoshi did notice that a lot of the creatures seemed to be targeting his dad, though, and he was sure it had something to do with the guy that was fighting All Might. Hitoshi was willing to bet that man didn't want Dad erasing his quirk. Quirks? Every time Dad managed to get that man in his sight, one of the monsters abruptly changed their target to him. Hitoshi saw a slight opening, but he didn't think he'd be able to make it past them to get to safety. Fuck, why did he have to get abducted without any weapons? He would kill to have a scarf on him right now. He turned his attention back to the main fight, ducking as he saw his dad throw another of the monsters into the path of a very irate endeavor, and looked back to All Might and the guy in the suit. He felt more than saw his dad come up next to him, watching in horror as the suit man's arm turned into a sharply pointed tentacle and stabbed All Might in the stomach.
Hitoshi, you need to get out of here.
He heard Dad hiss at him. Hitoshi could feel the terror sneaking up on him. If All Might couldn't beat this guy, what hope did the rest of the heroes have? Dad was already just barely holding his own hurt here. And where was Papa? Hitoshi started looking around. He hadn't really heard Papa fighting. Is he okay? Papa's fights aren't anything but subtle. If he was okay, he should have been able to hear him. Hitoshi started when he felt a hand on his shoulder and almost went to throw the person when he realized it was just Dad.
Hitoshi, you need to get out of here,
he repeated. Where's Papa? Hitoshi asked, ignoring Dad telling him to leave. He knows he needs to leave. He wants to. But he also needs to know his Papa is okay. Dad huffed slightly, understanding where Hitoshi was coming from, and pointed.
He's over there, kicking ass. Now will you get off this battlefield and get to safety?
Hitoshi looked over to where Dad had pointed and saw his Papa surrounded by monsters, no other hero around him, open his mouth and scream, with no sound coming out. He was worried up until he started seeing the creatures exploding around him. How's he doing that? Hitoshi asked as Dad decided he'd spend enough time trying to convince Hitoshi to leave and just picked him up.
High frequency, low volume,
Dad answered.
You didn't think All Might could do a scream, did you? These are his most deadly attacks, the ones you won't do around others.
That made sense. Hitoshi looked back to where All Might was fighting the guy in the suit, but Dad had covered his eyes and turned his head back to the front.
You don't need to see that right now. You'll see it on the news later.
Shota managed to toss his son over the perimeter line and yell for an officer to make sure he stays safe before dashing back out into the fight. He had stopped Hitoshi from seeing what was most likely a killing blow to All Might, but that just meant the other heroes would need him out there more than ever to deal with that psycho. The swarm of monsters had finally started to thin out, so it didn't take Shota too long to locate the villain. His heart skipped a beat, though, when he saw the villain standing right in front of Izuku, and then skip a second time when he saw a severed wing at Izuku's feet while he held what looked like someone's arm in his hand. Shota had to get to his son, and he had to get there soon. He watched as that villain impaled All Might. He couldn't see All Might struggling to breathe, holding onto life by a thread. He can't let that villain do the same thing to his son. The villain was talking to Izuku, and as Shota got closer, he could hear what he was saying. The tone was soothing, relaxing, even if the words themselves weren't.
You could be powerful, unstoppable. Join me. Dear Katsuki has told me about you, and after witnessing the two of you in action, you would be a force to be reckoned with. Shota was about to risk everything and step in between the two of them when Izuku suddenly looked down at the arm on his hand, steered his expression, and then threw the arm at the villain. Time seemed to slow as the arm sailed in the air and hit the villain in the face with the open palm. You dare,
he hissed at Izuku,
to throw an arm at me?
All traces of the soothing, relaxing voice were now gone, replaced with an oppressive malignancy. Izuku glared at him. You are using some sort of quirk on me to try to persuade me to join you? almost didn't notice it, but you messed up on one thing.
And what would that be?
I had a stress grip on that arm. I shouldn't have been able to release my grip for a little while longer, at least until the battle here was done. Izuku shook his head slightly. I shouldn't have been calm enough to release a stress grip. Shota could almost feel the annoyance turning into anger, and knew it was only a matter of a few seconds before the villain attacked Izuku. Shota couldn't take the thought of losing either of his sons, so he dashed in, hoping to get in between the two before the villain could attack his son, but the villain instead turned to specifically target Shota. Less than a second later, the same tentacles that impaled All Might were shooting toward Shota, and he tried to activate his quirk, only to blink a moment later from the dry, dusty wind aggravating his eyes. He was fully prepared to die here, so long as both of his sons were safe, when he got pushed back by a loud sonic blast. When Shota looked up, Izuku was standing over him and facing the villain. His talents were still out, but now he was crouched in a defensive stance and glaring for all he was worth. "You don't have permission to attack my dad!" Izuku hissed at the villain before he took a deep breath. Shota barely had time to quickly cover his ears and scoot away from Izuku when he unleashed the same screech at this villain that he did at the monster from the USJ. Even with Shota covering his ears, the sound was way too loud for him, and he was sure he was going to need a visit with Chio right after this was over, when he felt something slide over his ears. He looked up to see Hisashi had put his spare headphones over his ears, thankfully blocking out all noise. Shota stood up with Hisashi's help, said a quick thanks to his husband, and looked back at the villain. He could see the villain clutching himself tightly, as if willing his atoms to stop vibrating apart. The villain seemed to regain his composure, so Shota looked at Izuku, only to see he had stopped to screech and was saying something to him. Shota started to lift the headphones off to try to hear what was being said, but Hisashi made him keep them on. "Don't. I have a feeling that the baby's going to start up again in a second," Hisashi sighed. "He's giving the guy time to give himself up, but after what he did to All Might..." Shota nodded as Hisashi trailed off, just as sure the villain would attempt to attack again. And, sure enough, his arms both bulged with some sort of attack, and Izuku let loose another powerful sound wave, so loud and high-pitched that Shota could feel the vibrations in his own body, to a much lower degree. Hisashi stepped in front of him and took a breath of his own, then added his own quirked scream, matching frequencies with Izuku. It took them longer than the creature at the USJ, but soon enough, the villain exploded in a shower of gore. Second time this year. This is the second time this year Izuku's killed someone with a screech, but at least this time he wasn't alone. Papa pulled him into a hug. He had helped Izuku work through some of the guilt of killing the gnome at the USJ, and Izuku was sure he thought Izuku would be feeling a lot like that this time. But strangely, Izuku felt okay. Not good, not at all, but okay. Izuku's head jerked up slightly as he heard a wet cough and a voice calling to him. All Might was waving him over. He dashed out of Papa's arms to run to the clearly dying hero, not fully registering that both Dad and Papa were following him. Izuku was sure he was hoping Izuku could fly him to get medical help, and Izuku was prepared to let him know that he couldn't fly right now, not with only one wing, when All Might gave him his signature smile. Izuku dropped down beside All Might, and, looking at his injuries, started pulling out first aid materials from his utility pouch. "I can't fly you to a medic right now, I'm sorry, but I can try to stop some of the bleeding when they get here." All Might coughed again. "Don't bother, young Midoriya," he said, voice quiet. "I won't make it off this battlefield." All Might paused to cough weakly, clearly losing the fight to stay alive. Please, Tamirai. I'm sorry, and that he was right." All Might closed his eyes. "No," Izuku whispered. All Might couldn't be. He couldn't be gone? Izuku checked his pulse and didn't feel anything. He bowed his head and sighed. A hand landed on his shoulder, and he looked up to see his dad there, with a pair of headphones around his neck.
"Come on, kid. Let's go see if we can help with the last few Nomu. Sashi can stay here with All Might. If there's no more to help with, we can find the medics and get someone sent here to take care of him."
Izuku wanted to protest, but there really wasn't anything he could really say. Besides, he could see a little bit of blood dropping from his dad's ear, and knew he needed to see medics. "I did that, didn't I?" he asked. Dad glanced at Papa, and Papa said, "It's not as bad as it looks, Zuzu. Yeah, sure can't really hear very well right now, but it's not the first time this has happened. I got the headphones on him before I got to bed, but his ears are probably ringing like crazy. Papa hugged him tightly. I've done worse to him, baby, and you didn't really have much choice in the matter. Please don't blame yourself, okay? Izuku stood up and glanced back at his dad and sighed. You're not mad about your hearing, are you? Dad shook his head.
My ears are ringing, yeah, but nothing too bad. I'm not nauseous and no vertigo. Even if I don't see a medic, I'll be fine. But Chio is somewhere here in this clusterfuck, so I'll be okay before we even get home.
The two of them started off towards the medics, finding that there were only 3 no more left, and they were all being handled already. They passed where Izuku had fought Bakugo and that creepy face guy, and Dad paused, having noticed his wing.
Izuku, hang on. Let me grab your wing. Maybe Chio can find a way to reattach it.
He reached down to pick it up, but Izuku tugged on his sleeve to get his attention. Don't bother, Izuku sighed. Not only can I not bring out my wings when they're injured, it's not the first time I've lost a wing. I'll be fine. Dad just stared at him as if he had grown a second head.
What?
Oh, my died. Oh no. That's not good. And also the last sentence, like, Izuku, what do you mean you've already lost wings? But anyways, guys, I hope you all enjoyed chapter 31 of Screech, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!